So let's talk about the recent painting competition drama that appears to have made Games Workshop change course, and a couple of rather fun model reveals with an event-exclusive miniature, and a rather cool-looking Judge of the Omnissiah. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I thought we'd do a quick news update video, rounding up a couple of things I found interesting over the week, taking a look at the weird rules from Armies on Parade, and 2 new character miniature reveals from the grim darkness of the far future. Jumping straight into it and starting with Armies on Parade, this was something that I saw posted around the internet in a fair few places, with a lot of people not really too happy about Games Workshop's rules change for the latest event entry thing for their current version of Armies on Parade, their painting competition where the idea is that you paint up an army and also a display board, set them out for all to see, and there's prizes and things both at a local level, and some of the winners from around the world get some prizes and showcasing on Warhammer Community. I think the rules for this one have been out for something like a couple of weeks now, I want to say. The one change that was small but also really quite impactful to a bunch of hobbyists and painters out there. Hadn't really gathered all that much attention when it first came out, but then kind of blew up on social media and Reddit in all sorts of different places, lots of people discussing it, and basically became a bit of a focal point for Games Workshop's attitudes to kit bashes and miniatures, just as it seemed like really quite a weird ruling on the face of it. Fortunately, it does seem that Games Workshop has fixed things, though whether or not it was clarifying intent or reversing course is a little bit less obvious. The new rule change was that basically Games Workshop seemed to be saying that there was no mixing of parts and components between the 2 different game settings that they have. Broadly, Games Workshop's miniature games being divided into their more fantasy-based settings like Age of Sigmar and the Old World, and their grim dark sci-fi settings with things like Necromunda, Warhammer 40k, and the Horus Heresy. In general, with any of their competitions and events, they tend to have sort of modelling requirements. If you're going to be playing things at official Games Workshop things, then you'd usually be expected not to be using bits and components from other companies or downloaded and 3D printed stuff. That's generally been the case for a while now. Not always looked on with great favour from the community, but kind of understandable for Games Workshop, basically not wanting to do things to sell other people's models when they could be selling their own. This new bit of wording went a bit above and beyond that though, and in a few sentences talking about the sort of miniatures that you could use in your display. They gave some examples like say not being able to use a Tyranid Norn emissary in their fantasy setting, and other things vice versa, but also saying parts and components from miniatures set in 40k can't be combined with their fantasy setting ones like Age of Sigmar or the Old World. The implication will be that say if you were an Orc player and used some Iron Jaws bits to make a cool Beast Snagger themed army, then that wouldn't be allowed, nor would say taking some Age of Sigmar Stormcast wings and sticking them onto some Sanguinary Guard, as a lot of people have been doing, or all manner of other fun head swaps or weapon swaps and things. Even if the bits were fully using Games Workshop models, and still the overall look of the miniature fit one setting or the other. I feel like perhaps part of the reason that this got people fired up a bit was just Games Workshop's general perception of not really being all that friendly to kit bashes and conversions, which I think maybe is a little bit less true than it used to be right now, but they certainly went through a really long period where they seemed to have a policy of not wanting to show anything that wasn't just an officially built and assembled kit in the way they'd normally recommend. The pages of White Dwarf and Warhammer Community very rarely ever showing anything that wasn't just an official kit painted up in a different way. Maybe the thinking being that they didn't really want to put the emphasis on kit bashes as it might distract people from buying individual products and items. Obviously most hobbyists aren't exactly great fans of that, as it's really cool to see all sorts of weird and wonderful conversions that people have made. And while I feel like plenty of people do kit bash things to save money in one form or another, certainly for some of the more high-end ones they might well be pricier than the base model. Say for example if you got some Warhammer kits and then bought say an Age of Sigmar kits to add some bits to it, you might well have spent more money at Games Workshop than you would have otherwise. I feel like that is maybe a little bit less true than it used to be. Say for example I had an article just literally last week showcasing a guy who'd converted a bunch of the new Eldar kits into Drukhari and Corsair themed miniatures. It does feel like they're trying to lose that reputation, though of course they're still only going to showcase Games Workshop bits being used together. For the Age of Sigmar thing specifically though, it's not like they themselves in their own codexes haven't occasionally used Age of Sigmar bits there. I saw someone bring up the example of this Lady Alinda model used as a Catan proxy in Codex Necrons, which does feel appropriate enough given that Catan can take all sorts of different shapes and forms, particularly the Transcendent one which only has the one rather set model, though I guess in theory this, even amongst their amended wording, wouldn't actually be allowed on the display board in their Armies on Parade competition. There does also seem to be a bit of a drive to separate out their settings as much as they can, say having completely different Space Marines in the Horus Heresy era and Warhammer 40k, or making the Chaos Demons less easy to just run as one direct army in both 40k and Fantasy equally. There's often a bit of a suspicion about maybe some sort of departmental competition between game systems at Games Workshop. A lot of that tends to be speculation or just people reporting on what other people have told them already unofficially, so hard to know exactly what's driving that particular trend towards separating things out, as it maybe seems a little bit pointless to actively discourage people to buy your kits for different purposes, even if they probably want to keep the aesthetics of the different settings at least fairly different to each have their own style. In any case though, as mentioned, it does seem that Games Workshop has backpedaled from this particular one really quite quickly. Yesterday they posted to their socials to basically say that they'd removed that particular bit from the Armies on Parade rules, though the post did say that they were clarifying their intent as opposed to actually making a rules change, and just basically trying to underline that the bits that they were trying to stop was using wholesale models from one setting in another, as opposed to bits and pieces for conversions. For their original wording though, they very definitely did say that parts and components specifically weren't allowed, which is quite different to whole models, and I guess you'd have to write both parts and components, which makes it seem a little bit less likely that it would be a mistake. But in any case, it's kind of nice that it's fixed, and I guess it depends on whether or not you're giving Games Workshop the benefit of their doubt as to whether or not that's just changing from one thing to another due to getting a bit of backlash for it, or whether or not they were just genuinely just miscommunicating it. I don't feel like either way is really the end of the world though. If it is just bound to a bit of a community pressure, then that's probably for the best. In any case, it seems good that they fixed it quickly, particularly if people were hard at work on their own display board entries. It's hardly exactly the sort of rule that really affected all that many people out there, given that it's only for people entering that specific competition who wanted to do some specific kit bashes, but maybe feels like an interesting sort of case study for how Games Workshop tends to treat conversions and kit bashes these days. Before we move on to take a look at the new miniatures, I'll just give a very quick shout out to the channel giveaway for February, which is into its last 24 hours now. If you're watching this video kind of early after it came out, the giveaway for the Knight household is coming to its conclusion soon. I'll cycle back to this one at the end of the video for how to enter if you'd like to. The prizes being 3 Titanic plastic knights of any sort, with 4 winners for each of those, so should hopefully get a few more armies of big stompy robots out there on the tabletop. Moving on to miniature reveals though, and first up, we had a Warhammer 40k model reveal at the start of the week. This one's called the First of the Faithful. It's basically a new sculpt for the Genestealer Cult Primus, their sort of battlefield cult commander sort of guy. Maybe something like the equivalent of Captains, Chaos Lords, or Caranesses for other armies, with sort of fighty command character kind of vibes. This one, along with an Age of Sigmar sculpt, will be the event exclusive miniatures for 2025. Games Workshop often do a pair of different commemorative miniatures announced at the start of the year. One for the store anniversary birthdays, and then one for the Games Workshop official events. So these ones tend to go on sale at certain big tournaments throughout the year, things like Adepticon, the LVO, the London Grand Tournament, and a few others, plus Games Workshop's in-house big central grand tournaments like the ones that they do across the USA in their tournament series. It does mean that these ones always tend to be a little bit harder to get their hands on compared with most people, given that they're often paired with buying an expensive event ticket, and also being local to that area or travelling for a long way to get there. It feels kind of unlikely that you'd want to do that for a miniature like this alone. It can be a bit unfortunate if there's one of these that you really like, given that there's not always that many easy ways to get it, aside from say asking friends or people to pick one up for you, or paying some rather inflated scalper prices. In any case, the first place that these ones should be on sale at will be Adepticon on the 26th of March, which was the one that I was expecting might be Games Workshop's next model reveal show. I think that usually tends to be the next one where they have some reveals for us after the LVO in January. In any case, for the model himself, I think he's done nicely enough, though maybe just isn't enormously different to the original Primus that's on sale at the moment. I guess potentially could be helpful enough for people who just want an extra Primus and not a Brood Coven. There's certainly armies that you might want more than one in. And I guess it's done in the same sort of style as the various different alternative sculpt character miniatures they've done over the years. It often tends to be a fairly relentless sculpt of Space Marine captains and lieutenants in different poses in the past, though we have had plenty of others, like say that unique Tau Ethereal, or the Leagues of Votan, Karl, and Ironhair Champion ones they've done. I have a feeling that it might not be one of their most broad appealing models ever, just due to the Genestealer cults having a fairly small fan base to begin with, and again, other than posing, maybe just not really having all that many different vibes to the current model. Speaking of which, here's the side-by-side for them. I feel like the new one's pose is pretty nice to be fair, actually drawing and firing that needle pistol of his, and equipped with the same weapons in his bone sword and his toxin injector claw. Though otherwise the rest of him is really quite similar, with a fairly similar looking cape, armour and general appearance. Overall not the worst model that Games Workshop's ever done, but at the same time I feel like it's maybe a little bit of a missed opportunity to do something a bit more wild. I feel like people quite enjoyed the really quite different take on the ethereal with that invocation of the elements one, so it could have been good to go for a Primus of a really quite different look and nature, just to be a bit more of a contrast if you had both of them. In any case, they also have an Age of Sigmar option as well. This guy's apparently Skaven Clawlord Ketek Throatbite. Pretty fun sculpt, I think. I must admit I don't know the Sigmar range quite as well as the 40k one, though I would personally probably rate him as the more fun miniature of the two just objectively. I quite like the fun little rat on the top of his armour there. Otherwise though, and the other new miniature reveal for the week was on Games Workshop's Heresy Thursdays, and it seems that we've had a double bill of Mechanicum model reveals. Last week we had that Titan Guard commander, and this week it seems to be a Mechanicum Judge lady. She's apparently an Arcuator Magisterium, Judge, Jury and Executioner for tech heretics and tech priests out there that have been experimenting with technology that's far beyond the Omniscience grace, and she has some rules for Horus Heresy. She seems to have been very consistently making really quite nice looking models for these individual character miniature releases, and in general the reception to her models has been really quite good. A couple of really quite weird and creepy servo arms ending in pincers on the top there, a sort of duelist style power sword and a scoped pistol, and shadowed by a little hunched over scribe bearing an enormous quill. Again, like a fair bit of the Heresy era stuff, could definitely be press ganged into 40k armies as needed. Like the one last week, I feel like she could make a pretty good stand-in for someone like a Skitarii Marshal, maybe Techno-Archaeologist, or maybe even an Engineer perhaps. I'd probably say one of the first two as the first pick though. I feel like for the character miniatures, the Mechanicum ones can pretty easily look equally good for 40k as Heresy. The aesthetics aren't really all enormously different, and maybe a little bit less so than the Space Marines. Finally, for Games Workshop news and announcements from this week, there was also a small update to their Warhammer physical store things. It looks like there's maybe a small rules change as to how you can collect free miniatures of the month, the ones where you go into the Warhammer stores themselves, and until they've run out of them, they've got a free miniature for a different faction each month. In the past, it's been some pretty interesting stuff, like say a Deathwing Knight was one of the best ones. This month it's Skaven with a couple of Skaven clan rats. I don't think they've often done two miniatures like that before. In any case though, it looks like they've had a small rules change that I hadn't seen before on their current article, saying that if you want to go into their stores and collect their free miniatures, then you now have to assemble them in store, which I had seen reported before as something that a few stores were doing, though not all of them. I guess that does mean that they might have a little bit less uptake on those. It could dissuade some people from just calling in who are stretched for time, maybe over a lunch break or something, or just prefer to do their hobbying and model making elsewhere, or might want to kit bash the model into something else, for example. On the other hand, it doesn't exactly take ages to assemble a single miniature, so it's still going to be useful to a bunch of people. Seems like Games Workshop wants to be using the free miniatures to actually force people to engage with the store just a little bit more than they were doing before, perhaps. In any case, for this month's offerings, they're available from the 1st of February. There's the Clan Rats for the free miniature, and then there's one of their collectible coin type things that's tied to purchases. That one's got an Astra Militarum Catacomb one. In any case, I'd certainly be interested to hear from any people who have been using those in the past. Would that dissuade you from calling in to collect a model? Finally, as mentioned previously, I'll just end with a little bit of channel news talking about the channel giveaway for February, which will be coming to a close in the next 24 hours or so. For this month, the prizes are for 4 winners to get a custom knight household, basically any 3 plastic Titanic, Imperial or Chaos Knights, and any number of those can be swapped out for 4 Armigers or War Dogs. Should be usable enough as a playable army right from the word go. As ever, for the channel giveaways, there's 2 equal ways to enter, links down in the video description. Either you can support the channel on Patreon for any amount. That gets you automatic entry each and every month, and it's the main thing that supports me to keep on making more videos on YouTube. Or alternatively, you can support via social media completely for free. And to enter that way, do each of these 3 actions, subscribe to the YouTube channel and like the Facebook page, and then after doing that, the giveaway post appears on the 1st of February, so it should be live when this video goes up. And to enter there, then reply to that with any picture of any 40k mini or imagery, along with your name and the date handwritten within the same photo, the last bit just to deter Facebook bots and spammers and make sure prizes go to real people. Then after the post has been up for 24 hours from midnight UK time, it gets locked and I do the draw, picking out the winners, and they'll be announced in the channel update video on YouTube on the 4th of February, and I'll contact the winners. After they've told me what they'd like, I'll post out the models after I've received my orders of them when I've bought them in. In any case, feel free to check that out, links down in the video description for either the Facebook page or the Patreon, and there will be further similar giveaways each and every month. I've already committed to the March one being for the big Emperor's Children box set. I also basically have the same rules but for March, but for 8 copies of that big set. In any case though, I'll leave that there for now. Let me know your thoughts as to the Armies of Prey thing and Games Workshop quickly fixing it. What do you make of the 2 new character miniatures? Look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or certainly keep the regular 40k updates coming, with new ones out just about every day. As mentioned, if you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, that's linked down in the video description, as well as entries to the giveaways and things. There's a few other bits, seeing occasional videos early, votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and other things like names in the credits. Feel free to check it out. In any case, an enormous thank you for listening though, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.